We can start now. The event has gone live. Aareev, you want to go first?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for attending the Sky's the Limits virtual fireside chat. I'm Aareev Panda, and I'm a sophomore at Gunn High School and the co-founder of Sky's the Limit. This is a public charity organization with a vision to enable equity in STEM education. During the pandemic, when access to education became a privilege for the society, as a Boy Scout and youth member of Palo Alto Council member Greg Tanaka's staff, I recognized the need to enable STEM education in underfunded classrooms in our society. That's when the journey of equity in STEM education began. In the last year, myself with my peers have made great progress to inspire and support more students in the pursuit of STEM careers. Sky's the Limit has benefited 1,000 plus students through unique STEM-based games and puzzles. Sky's the Limit also produces its original materials in the blog series for our peers. Definitely check it out in our website. This October, we have started a virtual fireside chat series on the topic Closing the STEM Gaps. We intend to invite several industry leaders and educators to share their ideas and stories with us. Today, we have our special guest, Shaz Kahng. She has been in several leadership roles as CEO, board member, and amazing author. She has broken several ceilings to make it to the top. With her, we have Vedha Santhosh, a student of Berkeley and aspiring to be our next generation woman leader in STEM and business. She'll be our moderator for today's fireside chat. With that, let me hand it over to her to take it forward.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be able to be here and interview someone so inspiring with diverse experiences across so many fields and so much leadership experience that she'll be able to share with us today. So Shaz, I'd love to start off some of our questions with this interview today. So I want to learn more about your past. Would you be able to tell me a bit about your upbringing and maybe some influences that made you gravitate towards a career that started in STEM and land in a school that was very prestigious and helped you really get academically rigorous?
Sure, Vedha. And anyway, I'm happy to be here. So thanks to you and Sumita and Aareev for inviting me. So I actually, when I was taking classes, especially in high school, I really was gravitating towards the science classes. So chemistry, biology, physics a little less so, but I really liked chemistry and biology. And the reason why, I just thought that they were really challenging and fascinating. And actually, everybody in my family was either in the profession of teaching or law. So I didn't have any scientists in my family. And I thought it was something that would be very interesting and challenging for me. I'm just a person who loves challenges. So I decided to focus on science. And when I was looking to apply to colleges, my father gave me some great advice because I was considering going pre-med. And there were a lot of people with biology majors who were not able to get a job after graduation. So he said, just pick a major that's specific enough that if you decide not to go to medical school, you can get a job. So I looked in the classified ads of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and I saw there were a lot of jobs available for food scientists. And I thought, that's an interesting job. It sounds like fun, and people always have to eat. So I thought, all right, I'll focus on food science. And I picked Cornell University because it had the best food science program in the country. So I ended up focusing there, and I ended up going to Cornell.
Amazing. That's such a cool major, and I love the story that led to it. Next, I want to learn more about maybe some role models. Even though people in your family weren't in the science fields, maybe there were other role models that really gave you a sense of direction, whether it be academic, professional, or even some values that you personally live by. I definitely have some. One of my most influential mentors was my speech and debate coach in high school. She was absolutely incredible and really helped me learn to express myself. So I'd love to learn about the importance of mentors to you and maybe some people that are role models to you right now.
I think in school, I had a couple of very important mentors. One was my biology teacher, AP biology teacher, and she was extremely tough. And I think she was the toughest woman I had met up to that point. And she really expected that, your knowledge of the subject matter would be high and you couldn't make mistakes. So I think interacting with her forced me to just raise my game. And then I had another another teacher in high school who just really cultivated my love of writing and reading, and that was really helpful. But I would say also my family, even though nobody was a scientist. Actually, my stepmother is a scientist, but my father, my mother, my aunt, they all came to this country with pretty much nothing. And they all ended up going to Ivy League schools, getting, a JSD or a PhD. And my stepmother also came from Korea, came to the US, and she ended up getting a PhD in biochemistry and was doing neurochemical research for Mount Sinai Medical Center. So it just was amazing to me that you could go to another country and study at the best universities and achieve, your dream. And my father always said, America is the greatest country because you can work hard and achieve your dream simply by just working hard.
Absolutely. That's so inspiring. And I really love how you were able to draw on all of those different experiences and channel different parts of that to lead to all of your success too. So after you finished being a scientist, you graduated with your food science degree, and you were in the science field for the early part of your career. Could you share your experience, how you transitioned out of that role and how you changed your career towards business and management and eventually executive roles?
Sure. So I started my career, I graduated with a degree in chemistry and food science from Cornell, and then started my career as a research scientist for Kraft General Foods. And my first project was inventing synthetic blueberries. So I was on this team that was inventing brand new, food prototypes and products. And it was very intellectually stimulating. And I thought it was really fun. But we would present our ideas and our inventions to the marketing team. And then the marketing team would review them. And then they would decide which ideas they wanted to fund. So some ideas died then, and some ideas were, made into products. And I was not always in agreement with the ideas they decided to fund. And some of the ideas I thought, okay, I don't think this is as consumer focused as some of the other ideas. And also just in terms of, production, ease of production, things like that. So I kind of sat back and thought, I want to be in a position someday where I am the one making those decisions. And I would like to run a business or run a company someday. But at that time, I didn't see any scientists who were also CEOs. So I knew I had to make basically a career change and switch and get my MBA. But what I wanted to do was always center my career on consumer focused businesses, which I did do. I worked in retail, apparel, footwear, consumer tech. But after business school, basically what I did was I said, okay, what are the skills and experiences that I need to have in order to prepare myself to run a business or run a company someday? So I first focused on strategy and operations consulting. Then I switched to a company where we built e-businesses like Sephora.com and e-luxury. And then I focused on marketing and branding. And then finally, I was ready to run a business. So I was recruited to Nike and ran several businesses there, including the global cycling business. And I was told I was the first woman at Nike to hold a global business P&L. So my team and I turned that around. We got it profitable for the first time in history and grew revenues by 300% and did a lot of innovative things. And basically, I just continued to get opportunities to run businesses. And I ultimately was able to get the CEO role a couple of times.
Amazing. It was really great to hear first in the very beginning of your career, even when you were a scientist, it sounds like you already had that entrepreneurial streak in you, looking at the desirability and the viability of the different options that you were innovating. And then, as you said, being on the other side of that, being able to make those decisions. I really love how you were able to accumulate a really broad set of experiences and then use all of those when you were in a bigger leadership position, leading all of those different business units with such incredible outcomes. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks. One thing I did want to mention that I think is important is that when I was in the labs working as a scientist, something I noticed, whenever we had to present our ideas, I noticed that most of the scientists did not like getting up and doing public speaking. And I found that I had actually done some training in college in public speaking, so that really helped me. So I think, whatever career you choose, but particularly if you're in the STEM field, to also be able to communicate your ideas clearly and persuasively is a really critical factor to being successful.
Absolutely. Really quickly, do you have any public speaking tips off the top of your head that are the most helpful for you? Maybe things you tell yourself before leading a general shareholder meeting, or the really large situations that you had to lead?
I think one of the key things is communicate simply, clearly, and try to come up with a mental image for people that is very easy for them to, process and remember. So, I think it's really important to identify what are the key points and make sure that you tell them in a colorful way that it captivates people's imagination and really makes it memorable for them.
Totally. I love how you said captivates people's imagination, because that's such a delightful part of storytelling that I feel like we can all miss when we're focusing on things that are really technical and trying to get those points across. So that was super valuable.
Yeah, actually, I will tell you one quick thing. When I was at Nike, I was only there for a couple of months, and I was asked to give a presentation at this meeting called the CSR, Corporate Strategic Review, and some of the guys had misled me and said, I don't have to prepare anything. It's very casual. And then 2 days before the meeting, I found out it was an extremely formal meeting, and I needed to prepare, and everybody else had like 80-page PowerPoint decks. So what I did was I only had basically a day to prepare. So I wove a story, and I used a lot of pictures and images, and made it very powerful in terms of the content. So it was short, but it was very memorable. And the senior management liked it so much, they said, we want other people to start using this format moving forward. So I think, if you can, in that case, it was a desperation move because I didn't have time. So I had to think out of the box. But if you can make your presentation more interesting, I think you'll be able to, just get a better result.
Absolutely. That was a really powerful anecdote. I can't believe people tried to mislead you, but then you came out with an even better product than all of them. So that's really inspiring. All right. Moving on to maybe something else, the other things that are really something that inspired you and stuck with you. Is there anything in your life that you can think of that has really dramatically impacted who you are today and how that translates into your career?
Sure. I think one of the things that was very memorable for me and really, I think, kind of changed my career was it was one of my first consulting projects as a manager. Actually, it was my first consulting project as a manager, and it was at a chemical plant. And we were it was a pretty big team of us. We were coming into the factory, and they kept telling us, when you get into the factory, turn left, don't turn right. And I was like, okay. And they reminded me of that 3 times. And I thought, there's something that they don't want me to see. So when we got there, we turned right. I said, let's go right. I want to see what's here. And so what we discovered was that there had been a massive explosion that had leveled that plant. So they basically rebuilt it on the left side. And we were sent there by the corporation headquarters to figure out if they were going to shut down the plant. So the plant manager had called all of the employees together, and he got up and he said, I have to introduce these consultants. He said, just let me say, I hate consultants. I don't think that this is going to be very valuable, but we have to do this because corporate asks us to do it. So, you have to cooperate. And I thought, okay, that's not the best introduction I have ever received. And what we were supposed to do immediately after that was each member of the consulting team was supposed to pick one of the people in the plant to interview. And nobody wanted to interview the plant manager because everybody was really scared at this point. And I just raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. What do I have to lose? So I went in there and I said, look, I understand you don't like consultants. Help me understand what are the things that are troubling you. And what I learned was he was extremely stressed out because this plant was making highly volatile compounds, and that's what caused the explosion previously. And he said, I have the lives of everybody in this plant, on my conscience every day. And he said, I think that you guys were sent by corporate to shut the plant down. And so I'm very angry about that. So I said, all right, I'll be honest with you, corporate actually is considering shutting this plant down. And but I said, I looked at all of the compounds that you are producing, and you are one of only 2 plants in the entire country that is producing a strategic molecule. This molecule is critical to the building. It's a building block used for one of the biggest business of the corporation. So I said, if we can focus on the molecules and the compounds that are critical to the business and steer the plant in that direction, I think we can save the plant and save everybody's jobs. But I said, I need you to work with me on it. And so in the end, we did save the plant. We actually ended up, the corporation ended up expanding the plant. And every time I went back there, and even after I was gone from the project, the plant manager kept asking about me, and, we developed a good rapport. So I think, it was a great result. It was a tough situation, but a great result. And, we ended up helping people and helping people preserve their jobs.
Absolutely. That's really incredible. And the power of empathy and being a great listener, I bet that really helped you thrive in that situation. Just curious, did your background in chemistry and food science help you get a more nuanced understanding of the molecules that they were delivering?
Yes. And actually, I think having a chemistry background was really crucial to this particular project, because they had a scientist on staff who was very knowledgeable about the production processes, and he refused to speak to anybody on the consulting team because he thought that they were not up to snuff intellectually. So he wrote a bunch of organic chemistry reactions on the board, and he said, if you can answer these questions, then I'll talk to you. So, and I went into the room and my team was just sitting there like, oh, what are we going to do? So I just solved the reactions and then called the guy back in. I said, okay, are we ready to talk? And then we were able to get a good discussion going. So that was, I think actually throughout my career, having a foundation of science has been a really critical component to my success.
Absolutely. That's so funny. Someone made you solve questions on a whiteboard, but overall, but that's a really great experience overall. All right. Now, on the flip side, that was one experience that, might have started off a little rocky, but really gave you a super useful foundation and a great experience to take into the rest of your career. Now, is there any other anecdote or experience where you might have done something differently? Looking back with all the experience you have now, would you have taken a different course of action?
I think so. So I actually had an opportunity to start an active apparel company, because one of the things I noticed was that a lot of activewear and a lot of yoga clothing was made out of cotton, and once cotton gets wet, it's just really uncomfortable. So I had this idea to start an active apparel company using technical fabrics, and I had a partner who was very experienced in apparel production, especially, sports apparel. And we actually got funding. So we were pretty close to being able to launch the business. And then my partner injured himself, and he really hurt his back. And he said, Shaz, I can't do this venture. He said, I have to have a job, because he had also 2 kids. He said, I have to have a job that has health insurance. So he said, I'm out. And I considered for a minute, should I do it on my own? And I thought, he has really critical knowledge that I don't have, and I don't think I'll be able to do this myself. So I decided not to do it. And this was actually right around the time that Lululemon launched with a very similar idea. So I kind of wish I had more of the entrepreneurial streak back then, and just pushed through and found the other expertise to supplement my knowledge. So that's one thing that I kind of wish I had done differently.
Totally. That's crazy that Lulu started around that same time. But yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Follow up on that question. Do you remember something that you've done that you wish everyone else was doing?
Yes, I think this is actually helpful for other people. So I tried to be very thoughtful with each new role or position that I had. And what I tried to do was basically this. So I tried to think of 3 things either skills or experiences that I wanted to gain from that particular role. And then I also thought of what are 3 areas that I can contribute to the business in this role. And that way I was able to measure my progress against specific goals that I laid out. And I knew when I had come to the end of a role because I completed all those things, or new things came up and I said, okay, here's 3 new skills that I can learn. So I think it helped me be very intentional about each position, each role, and it kept me it kept my progress in that role top of mind. So I was just always able to feel like I was achieving the things that I had set out. I find that a lot of people, when they take a new role, they're just excited, but they don't really have a point of view of what they want to get out of that role. So I think it's really helpful to be intentional and thoughtful about each position that you take.
Absolutely. I love those personal KPIs to really set your intentions and make sure that you can hit your own benchmarks. Do you think you could give us an example of some goals that you might have had earlier in your career?
Well, I think I'll give you an example. When I was I had my first opportunity to run a business. It was the Nike cycling business, and it had been run for 7 years by a professional track cyclist and had never made a cent. And this was my first opportunity to run a global business. I was really excited. And I thought I finally, achieved my dream of, running a business. And I went around to meet everybody on the team. Most of the team was male and they were all avid cyclists. And everybody asked me, how much do you know about the sport of cycling and the business of cycling? And I answered honestly and said, not much, but, I'm a quick study and I'll learn it. And a couple of people said to me, I don't think you could do this job. And so the experience of having a new team and a couple of people who were very skeptical was something that it kind of was a blow to my confidence. But I developed this thing I call ABC, which is always be confident. And I thought, you have to project confidence, even though you've never done this before. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to be enthusiastic about it, set out a vision so other people will follow you. So I said to the team, look, I do know how to run a business. I do know how to turn around a business and a brand. And, I expect to leverage your expertise on the sport of cycling and the business of cycling. So let's work together, let's collaborate, let's, make this really successful, because who wants to work for a business that's losing money? And I think being able to we grew revenues 300%, we made it profitable. But the most important thing was, I think we learned to really work together well. And we worked and we developed our own culture, and it was a much more supportive culture. So I think, the achievement of running a business, doing it successfully, but most importantly, doing it in a way that everybody really enjoyed working together. Those were all like really critical components.
Amazing. I really love how you turned it into an environment where people could lift each other up and you can draw on each other's experiences instead of everyone being a store of the same knowledge and experience to that role. Amazing. All right, that was it for the questions about your past experiences, things you've learned throughout your career, and lessons that you take with you today. Now, I'd love to understand some things that might be affecting you in the present. So I want to start off with a question that's a little more personal. Has there ever been a break in your career when you had kids? And how did you manage balancing motherhood and your career? Was there ever a moment where you had to sacrifice one for the other?
Yes. And I will say this, there are a lot of people who ask about work-life balance, and I think that is such a misnomer, and it's setting people up for failure. And I really wish we wouldn't use that term. I think it's really a matter of, work-life juggling. And, sometimes in your life, the career ball is going to be higher. Sometimes the family ball is going to be higher. Sometimes community is higher. Sometimes spirituality is higher. Sometimes health is higher. So at any given point in your career, you're going to be constantly juggling these balls, and one of the balls is going to be higher in importance. And I think that's fine. And in my experience, when I was a CEO of Lucy Activewear, we were turning the business around. We were making hundreds of decisions every day. And my husband and I were expecting our twin girls. And I ended up taking a 2-week maternity leave because I felt like I couldn't be away from the business that long. And I will tell you, it was just so incredibly difficult. And I was exhausted all the time. I think it was a mistake. I would definitely not recommend that to anybody. I think for me, I didn't realize, okay, at this point, the family ball is higher and I have to focus on that a little bit more. I wish I had given myself more time to spend with my family in the beginning. But I ended up taking 5 or 6 months off after I wrapped up that role. And I thought, okay, I'm going to spend this time with my daughters. And in that time, I actually got the idea to write a novel. So I ended up writing this novel during that period of time. So for me, I have to be busy all the time. I don't know why. But I just recommend that, you think about what's important in your life at different times and make sure you're focusing on that so you can maintain your health, mental health.
Absolutely. Wow, that sounds really tough to have been in such a large leadership position and then having the growing of your family and having to balance those two at the same time. So it's really great to hear your insights on how you would do that differently and your advice for other people going forward. Is that one of the biggest challenges that women are facing with their career growth? Or what are some other experiences that you think are really unique to women and how we experience our careers?
Well, I think it's just challenging when you're a woman in a significant leadership position and you have young children, because you just, and for me, my husband also was a CEO. So we were CEOs at the same time with young children. And, still somebody has to do the grocery shopping and do the laundry and things like that. But I think it's really critical to have a partner who, is a great partner. And, my husband was really great about, doing the grocery shopping or helping with the girls. So I think you've got to have some kind of support system around you. And I would definitely recommend, if you have a family, it's great to be closer to your family so you can get that support. We were not close to family, and I think that added another layer of difficulty and challenge. But it's possible to do everything. It's just, you just have to have the right support network, and you have to have a supportive partner. But I would say this, I waited till I was, a little bit older to have kids, and it might have been better to have them when I was a little bit younger than when I was more energetic.
Wow. All right, great. Thank you so much for letting us into a little glimpse of your personal life and how that interacts with your career. Throughout this talk, there have been so many moments where I personally felt so inspired by so many of the things you were mentioning. So I'm curious, who's someone that personally inspires you that you really admire and why?
Well, one person, I haven't met her, but one person I really admire is Katherine Jansen, who's the head of research and development for Pfizer. She was the one that worked with a team of about 650 experts to create and test a viable COVID-19 vaccine in less than a year, and using, really unproven mRNA technology. I think that's so amazing that she applied her skills, led this team, and they created something that really saved lives and did it in record time. I think that's just so phenomenal. And I'd love to see, more leaders like Catherine. And then I would also say, I think Elon Musk is also pretty amazing, because he created, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Boring Company. He's created more companies in a lifetime than multiple people have done. So, and the thing that I think he's done successfully is make engineering and STEM careers kind of cool. So I appreciate those aspects about how he has, how he has had an impact in the workforce.
Absolutely. All of those leaders sound like such ceiling smashers, and we would love to be a part of the Ceiling Smashers Club. So I want to learn more about what really inspired you to write business novels that really inspire positivity about women in the workforce and how we can transcend barriers like people telling us we're not good enough or people making environments inhospitable.
Well, I think one of the things that I noticed when I was reading fiction novels, whenever there was a character that was like a male CEO, he was attractive and smart and successful and had great friends and athletic and a great loving family and a wonderful dog. But when you had a female CEO or a female business leader, she was, in most cases, allowed to be successful at her job, but she would be trying to quash the careers of other women, or she'd have, 10 cats, or she was, desperate to get married. And I thought that is not reflective of reality at all. You look at Sumita, who's one of the founders of The Sky's the Limit, and you see intelligent, positive, inspirational women. And I worked with so many women and know so many women from business school who are just amazing. And I thought nobody's writing about them and nobody's writing for them. So I wanted to change that. And that's why I wrote my first novel, The Closer. And it's about the first female CEO of a sports company and the secret society of women who help her succeed, called the Ceiling Smashers. And the other thing I wanted to make sure I communicated in my book was that you can be a principled, honorable person. And even if you're in a very tough environment and people are doing things that are very negative, you can still hold yourself to higher standards and not change anything about your character and still succeed by just using your brains and your creativity and getting people to collaborate with you.
Absolutely. That's really powerful. And I love how you saw something that wasn't addressed and took it into your own hands. Have you always been into creative writing? And what was the process of actually writing a book and getting that off the ground and sending to publishers and actually completing such a huge task? What was that like?
It's, actually, I think writing a book is harder than running a company because it's just so much work. But the way I did it, they have what they call plotters and pantsters. So plotters are people who outline the story and then they write towards that outline. Pantsters are people who kind of write by the seat of their pants and they think, oh, what's inspiring me today? And I just didn't have time to do that. And also I'm a pretty organized person. So I outlined the whole story and then I took each chapter outline. And when I took my young daughters to the park or something, or they're playing in the sandbox, I'd look at it and I'd think about the story and I'd kind of write it in my head. And then when they were taking a nap, I knew I have an hour and a half to actually sit down with my laptop and write. So I ended up writing the first book in 10 months, but I went back to work full time and the editing process took, I think it was about 2.5 years. So it was tough. And the interesting thing was I did speak with some literary agents who were interested and publishers, and I got pretty close to a publishing deal, but they were saying, okay, would you mind changing the main character to a man? Which, I thought this completely doesn't make sense. And they also said, well, also we maybe change the location of the story, change some of the supporting characters. And like, this is what we're thinking for the cover. And I thought, no, this is what I had, my idea for the cover. And I talked to other authors who had been published and they said, once you give your manuscript over to a publisher, you have no control. They can change anything they want, basically. And I thought, this is my story and I want to maintain control of it. So I went through the independent publishing route so I could maintain that control. And I'm very happy that the product came out the way that I wanted it to.
Absolutely. That's crazy how they were trying to completely shift the narrative of what the story is and why it's important. So I really love that you were able to hold on to the core of it and bring out these themes that are so important to hear about of successful female CEOs and being in industries that can be really tough on outsiders.
Yeah,
So,
and I also think, Vedha, you have to be able, if you really believe in something, you have to push back when you think something doesn't make sense. Because also they were saying the publisher wants you to have the character really, desperate to get married or really crazy about shoes. And I was like, she's working for a sports company. She's wearing sneakers. She's not worried about shoes. It doesn't make sense. So I think when you have an instinct, you've really got to follow it.
absolutely. So for people that might not have been aware of the challenges that women can face in the workplace, do you think your stories were able to change their perspective and open their eyes to some of the hidden struggles that women might be facing?
I hope so. I think, when I actually, I've had feedback even from male readers who said that when they're faced with a really tough business situation, they think, oh, what would Vivian Lee do? And I think that's really gratifying because it seems like this character is in their conscience of, okay, as I'm processing a problem or a difficult situation or trying to figure out how to creatively solve a problem, I'm drawing from this character that I read about in this book. So for me, that really accomplished one of the main goals, which is to change how people think about women leaders.
Absolutely. What are some traits that you've seen in women leaders that make them really great at business and making these pivotal decisions?
Well, I think that women are, I think they're definitely really good listeners, and I think they're very collaborative and inclusive. I've seen some really great female leaders. If there's a discussion going on, they're great at drawing some unique ideas out of people who maybe aren't participating as much. I think, women are more focused on the entire person, not just what the employee is bringing to this job. So as a result, I think they really focus on personal development of the people that they're working with on their team. I think they're really good at motivating and rewarding people, and also just injecting some fun and just trying to make it an enjoyable work experience. So some of the best female leaders that I've seen them do all of those things really well.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for that overview of your career and being a part of the Ceiling Smashers Club. And
I'm sorry, Vedha. I just wanted to make one more comment, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I also wanted to make an observation that I also think that scientists also make really great leaders, because if you have a science background or an engineering background, you have this a mindset of being able to experiment and try new things and be innovative, and also not being afraid to change your mind after you're faced with information that was different than what your hypothesis was. So I think also scientists, engineers, people with a science background, they're just naturally curious people, and that makes them great at processing information, digesting it, thinking about it, and coming up with solutions. So I would also say if you're a female scientist, you have even more of an advantage.
Totally, especially in a business environment where there's so many channels of information, having that scientific grounding of making evidence-based decisions and constantly having an evolving hypothesis, I can totally see how that would really make you a well-rounded leader. Great. All right. Now let's move on to the future and see what female leaders have on the horizon. So I'm wondering, how can female board members like yourself fix the gender gap in STEM roles in the workplace?
I think, it is challenging because even as a board member, you do have impact, but at the end of the day, when you look at all of the board members across all the corporations in the world, they're still predominantly male and still predominantly white male. So I think as we interact and we work alongside, these colleagues, it'll open their minds to what are the possibilities, what is different with this person in the mix. And ultimately, I think it'll help them consider a broader spectrum of people when they're making a decision to fill a board seat. But I think as a female board director, you can certainly do things like, count the room. It's called counting the room. So you look around the room and say, okay, how many women are in here? How many people have a diverse background? And what different talents do we have here? And if you're working with a company that says that diversity is a priority, you need to really encourage them, emphasize that they need to actually act upon it. I've seen many companies where the senior leader says, we believe in diversity, yet you look at their management team and there's no diversity in it. So I think as a board member, we have to consistently ask the questions and make sure that we're coaching the CEO and his team to consider talent that is diverse and can bring a different perspective. In many cases, it really helps them broaden their thinking about the business and may end up generating new opportunities for the business.
Definitely. I love how you mentioned a lot of these companies do have these diversity initiatives and outwardly say that this is a large priority, but it's important to see if they're actually walking the walk rather than just talking. So in that vein, do you think businesses are doing enough to attract women into the workplace?
I don't know if attraction is the main issue. I think businesses are getting better now at attracting more women in the workplace. But, even you look at a company like Nike, where at the entry level, it's 50% male and female, or at least it was when I was there.
Mhm.
But then when you get to the top ranks, it was, less than 2% female. So, and interestingly, I led this study when I was there with a couple of other colleagues, and it was really on looking at the diversity at each level of management. And it was funny because we looked at the top management, and it seemed like the numbers were inflated. And I said, wow, we don't have this many women and minorities at the top layer. And they said, oh, well, you count for twice because you're a woman and a minority. So we counted you in the numbers twice. And I said, well, I'm only one person, so that doesn't really make sense. But I think the main thing is really, how do you retain and develop people? Because one of the things I found, especially with very talented women, especially people, with people of diverse backgrounds as well, they'll look to the top and they'll just say, okay, I don't see anybody at the top who looks like me. What are my chances of getting one of those spots? And, if they look at the next layer and it's like, okay, still not a lot of, women or people of color in the next layer, then I would say the company's probably not doing a great job of cultivating diversity and finding people who are talented and bringing them up, because people are going to make decisions based on the leadership that they see at the company. So I
Totally.
think, the development, finding people, elevating them, the people who are, the talented people, but just, retaining people is really critical, and making sure people are given the opportunities they deserve.
Absolutely. I think those statistics, the 50% split at the entry level versus less than 2% at the top, really paints a picture and shows us what a huge problem this is. Now, in addition to companies not maybe retaining women and helping them develop into the best leaders and giving them the opportunities to be at the top of these workplaces, there's also a pay gap. Women aren't getting compensated as much as their male counterparts for the same level of work. So have you experienced that in your career? And what would be your advice to your young daughters that are going to be entering the workforce in that kind of environment? Do you see it changing?
Yeah, well, I actually, interestingly enough, when I was at Wharton, I was doing a summer internship, and there was a day that there was going to be a reception with the CEO of the company. And I was talking with other summer interns, and one of the summer interns came up to me and she said, what are you getting paid for your internship? And I said, I'm getting paid this amount. I said, how about you? And she told me. And she was like, I'm really upset. I said, why? And she said, because I just talked to one of the guys, and it looks like they're paying the guys more than the women, regardless of school. And the woman that I was talking to, we were both going to Ivy League schools, and the two guys that they got information from were not going to Ivy League schools. So I said, let's ask the head of HR. So we went to the head of HR and we said, is it true that women are being paid less than men? And she said, yes, that's just how the company does it. And she said, I don't agree with it, but that's how the company does it. And I said, wow, that's not good. And I said, because then when you're entering the workforce at this company, you're already starting behind. So I said, that's how are you going to attract women of talent to come here if you're already, giving them a disadvantage? And she said, well, I don't know, it's, really not my call. And then the CEO was coming, and, she said, I wouldn't ask him in front of all these people. And I thought, okay, I won't ask him, but I will say that, so I asked him a question that I thought was a really good question about, what are the most critical new products that are going to fuel the growth of this company, and that he thinks, they're having a challenge building. And I think after that, we had a discussion. I brought some of the other female interns, and I think he realized, oh, some of these female interns are really bringing a lot to the party. And I don't know if he had the same conversation with the male interns, but hopefully that opened up his thinking. But it was a great lesson for me, because when I got my first job, I was offered a good salary, but I said, look, I'd like to negotiate a higher salary because of these reasons. And I said, I bring, industry expertise, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, we have a salary cap for this level, and you're already at the cap. So I said, all right, well, how about this? How about a performance bonus? So I said, you can pay me this bonus if I achieve these things. You can figure out what you want me to achieve. And so if I don't achieve them, you don't lose any money. And if I achieve half of them, you're still getting a benefit. So they thought, oh, that's actually pretty intriguing. So they let me do the performance bonus, and I worked on this project. And I told the two managers of the project, look, I want to do an awesome job, and I want to get a 5 rating on my performance reviews, 5 out of 5. So along the way, give me feedback. I'm going to ask for feedback and just let me know what I can be doing better. So at the end of the project, I got 5s on both performance reviews, and I got the performance bonus. So on every job since then, I've always negotiated some kind of performance incentive.
Awesome. That's really great actionable advice that I'd love to take with me in the future. Great. All right. One more question. What is your advice to your daughters when it's time for them to choose their college major? Because this was such a pivotal decision for you with all of your reasoning for being pre-med and then making sure that it's versatile. So do you think you would have similar advice for your daughters?
I think so. So I'll tell a quick story. I was on the subway in New York, and this guy came on and he started singing. And I was looking at the other passengers, and he was singing so off key. It was horrible. And we're all just like, wow, this is uncomfortable. This guy is really bad. And then he took a pause and he said, okay, who's going to pay me to stop singing? And people just started taking out money. So, what he was doing was, had a passion, but he was getting paid for not doing it. And what I'd tell my daughters is really combine the 3 P's: passion, purpose, and pay. So find something that you're passionate about, work towards a purpose that is going to benefit society, and do something important with that foundation of education. And then also the pay piece of it, you've got to do something that is going to allow you to make a comfortable living, because by the time my daughters go to school, it's going to be $1 million investment to pay for college, and I want them to be able to see some kind of return on that. So yeah, I would say passion, purpose, and pay has to be combined.
Definitely. I think those are 3 really core elements that all of us can focus on going forward. Okay. Now I'm very, very curious if you could give one piece of advice to other young women like me who might just be starting off their careers, trying out internships, getting different industry experience, or even before me, since I'm in college. When you're in high school, you're exploring all of these different career paths in front of you. What advice would you have for us at this very formative stage?
I would say this is some advice my father also gave me, which is avoid the cockroach perspective. So, I don't know if you've ever killed a cockroach, but I used to live in New York City and I'd see them often. I noticed that the cockroaches that survived were the ones that looked up and they would see the foot coming and they'd scurry away. So avoiding the cockroach perspective career-wise is, don't just focus on, your work or your studies. Lift your head up. Look around at what's going on in the world, look at what your experiences are, and always be curious about, things that intrigue you. I think if you keep your head up and looking around, you won't stay in a role that's, the wrong role for you. You won't work with people that you don't admire. I mean, you want to work with people that you really can learn from and that you think are honorable. You want to do something worthwhile. I think you want to continue to learn and grow as a person. So it's very easy. And this happened to me in school. I was just so focused on my studies, but I think it's really important to look up and also look around the community. What can I do to help? The more well-rounded you are as a person, I think just the better life you're going to have and the happier you're going to be.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for all of that wisdom. I really appreciated that advice, especially with the very memorable avoid the cockroach perspective anecdote. So thank you for that. Now, I would love to open it up to some Q&A from our audience. We have such an incredible panelist. So if you have any questions at all about her incredible experience, her perspectives on these large problems affecting women in the workplace, or anything else, we would love to hear it. So this is your opportunity to get your questions answered. While we are waiting on Q&A, I have some quick fire questions that I'd love to bounce off of you, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay, since you have so many different the commitments at any given time. Since you're a board member, you're a published author, there's so many different things that you juggle in addition to raising your family. So I was wondering, what are some strategies that you implement in your everyday life to stay organized? You mentioned earlier something so small, but was so inspiring to me. When your girls were taking a nap, for that hour and a half, you would sit down and carve out time to actually work on your book. I can't imagine how much discipline that takes and mental fortitude to be able to bounce from different things and actually sit down and get work done like that. So I was just wondering, what tips for organization do you have that have kept you functioning at such a high level for so long?
Well, I have different lists. I usually make a list every day of what I want to accomplish. And I also have a separate list for family things, for creative things, and then, career things. But I just try to be really, I actually plan my entire day every day. And I say, okay, this is how much time I'm going to spend on each thing. And it gives me a sense of accomplishment. But I would say also one of the things I also try to do every day is just get some exercise and take a moment to just, the fall leaves are changing, to just take a moment to appreciate something beautiful in life. I think it just helps with your perspective and you're not just feeling like I have to do, list 1 through 10. But I do think being able to be really specific about what it is you want to use your time for is an important thing, but you also need to have downtime. So I also schedule in some time to just read a book or relax.
Vedha,
Awesome.
we have a live question on the
Amazing.
chat.
Yes.
The
All right.
question is from Prakash. He wants to know, what's your process of setting goals
For career wise?
for career wise? Yes.
Well, I was mentioning earlier to Veda, for each job, I usually try to think of, 3 skills that I want to have or 3 experiences I want to have. So I think it's good to have kind of long-term goals. For me, my long-term goal is to run a company or become a CEO. You also have to have like nearer term, goals as well. And I think something that's really critical is to have strong mentors and sponsors in the company that you're working with, and say, and let them know these are the goals, these are experiences. Because something that helped me become a consulting partner was I had 2 great mentors, and one was great at client relationships and sales, and the other was just a brilliant idea person and great analytically. And so I said, these are the things I'd like to learn from you, and these are also the skills I'd like to develop. Can you help me get these experiences? So I was really clear about communicating what I wanted to do. And I think just being able to reflect on what it is your overarching goal is. But the other thing is, if you're going down a path and you're feeling like, okay, this, I'm not really enjoying this, or this wasn't how I expected it to be, then, then just change directions. I mean, many people over the course of their career, they're probably going to do, 5 to 7 different careers. So if you're stuck with something that you don't feel is working for you, you can always change. You always have that opportunity. But I would say if you have the foundation of having a STEM education, it gives you a better springboard to be able to make those changes.
Absolutely.
That is great. We have a second question from Harriet. She's asking, she loved the public speaking tips that you shared. Is there anything more you can share for people, like you said, scientists are scared about speaking in public, or anything else you can share some tips with her?
Well, I mean, I remember my very first speaking experience. It was, I was running for an office in high school, and I kind of flubbed my first few lines. And I thought, this is the worst thing, somebody who's not really comfortable with public speaking, and then you mess up in the first, 15 seconds. But I was just like, okay, I just have to recover. And I ended up doing a very successful speech because part of what I did was I injected humor, and it was more memorable that way. And I ended up winning the office that I was running for. But I would say every time you do some kind of public speaking, just think about, from the audience perspective, what is going to make this, more intriguing to them, or more educational, or what is it that I'm trying to convince people to do? And The other thing, if you're doing public speaking in a company where you're trying to convince people in a meeting to adopt a new idea, I would pick the most influential people, maybe like 2 or 3, and I would pre-present to them. And I'd say, you've got such a great point of view on this, and people really respect you, what do you think about this idea? And then I'd kind of incorporate their ideas, get their support. So by the time I was in the meeting, if it was a very contentious meeting, I knew I would have, 2 or 3 allies already. And then they would speak up and say, oh yeah, I agree with this idea and this is why we should do it. So the more you can prepare the groundwork, the better result you'll have.
That is great. That is great. Thank you very much. We have one more question. Well, couple more. One from AJ. And his question is, you talked about diversity in workplace. How do you see hiring working alongside diversity in niche business areas? Have you come across any in your career, and how did you overcome the challenge of, or what advice you have for leaders on how to support their teams?
I want to make sure I understand the question. He's saying hiring in niche areas, so like certain types of people being hired for certain roles. Is that what he means?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
and there's no diversity in that area. So how do you
Okay.
encourage? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I gave a talk recently to a company that the CEO was saying they were trying to increase the number of women engineers in their company. And he said that some of the managers were a little hesitant about bringing women onto their engineering team. And he said, what can I do? And I said, well, do you have any success stories that you can point to? Because what I would do is I would take those 2 or 3 success stories and really elevate them. And I would take the people who are, hesitant about making this decision and share with them, the manager of this other area who did have success, and talk about some of the challenges they had, some of the adjustments they had to make, but ultimately, how well it's working and what the results are, because people will always gravitate towards a vision that is working and that's positive and that's giving the results that they really are striving for. So the more you can show them a vision that they can see happening in their own business, the more likely they will be to change their thinking.
It's a great response, and it's a great nudge for leaders like us who are hiring as well. Thank you very much. We have another question from Kumar. Thank you, Shaz and Veda, for this great interview and the tips. I have a question. What will be 1 or 2 tips for handling anxiety during difficult times, especially for youngsters in college or starting their careers?
I think one of the best ways to handle anxiety is to make sure you're prepared. And I think I had this experience in consulting where I had a negative experience. And then I was about to give a big presentation, and I said to the partner on the project, I said, I'm really nervous about this because, I had a bad experience with this other partner I worked with. And he said, look, this material better than anybody. There's no question that can come up that you are not able to answer. So he said, just relax and, get out there and have confidence in yourself. And I think one of the things I see very often is, very talented women who just aren't giving themselves they're not allowing themselves to feel confident, and sometimes not taking the risks that they know they can handle. So I would just say, sometimes you just have to push yourself in an uncomfortable situation and realize it's probably going to be uncomfortable for the first, minute or 2, but that's not really that long. Once you get into your kind of mode of presenting, you're going to be fine. So the way to get out of that is just, practice the first part of whatever you're going to talk about, so you're really confident in that. And I would also try to inject some humor in the beginning, because that gets the room just to relax a little bit, and that will make you more relaxed as well.
We have a couple more questions now coming in, and we are in the last few minutes. Prakash is asking, you mentioned you are a quick learner. Can you describe your approach to get comfortable in a new domain? And say you have 2 to 3 months.
Well, that actually is the case in many situations, especially like if you're a CEO. So One of the things that I did, actually, when I took over Lucy Activewear, which is a business that had never made money in 12 years, I looked at, we had a high degree of variability in the performance of stores. So some were performing really well, some were terrible, and some were right in the average. So I hired a head of store operations. I said, let's go around and visit the best stores, the worst stores, and the average stores, and talk to people, act as customers, figure out. So I think the thing you could do is really create a plan for what are the areas of knowledge that I need to be conversant in to really understand this business. So I outline, okay, what do I need to understand strategically, operationally, from a customer perspective, technology, production, whatever it is. And then I just go after each area. And I have never had a situation where I was underprepared. Most of the cases I was overprepared. But if you show up and you're new to a role and people are like, wow, okay, Sumita knows this business down. I mean, she knows it better than I do. I've been working here for 7 years. Then they're going to be more willing to listen to you.
Very quick follow-up question on that. Do you have any frameworks you could share with us for when you're getting to know a new industry or you're getting to know a new business model? Are there any quick things that you look for, some bullet points that you just need to know to have your bases covered when you're entering a new domain?
It depends on the type of business. It's a little bit different for different types of business. For a consumer focused business, I always look at, starting with the consumer first, what, basically, what's the profile of the consumer they're targeting, whether the consumer's, needs, motivations, experiences, what's their journey, and what's going well, what isn't going well. And then in the context of competitors, what are they doing that's really great, or, something that we should consider doing. And then I look outside the industry as well. What are some things that experientially, are very unique that we might be able to take and incorporate into this business? I always think that the thing that's really the definition of creativity is taking 2 or 3 separate concepts and pulling them together in a really powerful way to come up with something new.
Awesome. I think we have one last question from Aareev. Aareev, you want to ask before we wrap up? We are on the top of the hour.
So how can boys support women in STEM? And is there any way to do that?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I think, there are a lot of, obviously a lot of boys and men in STEM areas. I think, partnering with girls in labs and coming up with projects that you can do together. You can do projects outside of school together. I saw there were a couple of young people who decided to launch a rocket, and there's just so many things that you can do. So I think fostering that curiosity and helping to cultivate somebody else's imagination, showing that you support them and collaborate with them, and make it fun and work alongside with them, come up with a project that you think you'll enjoy.
That is amazing. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you, both of you, Shaz and Vedha. A lot of speaking tips, passion, purpose, pay. I loved it. I really loved that. Beautiful tips for many who are attending today. And very thoughtful questions, Vedha. I was enjoying the entire series, listening to your questions and responses. So thank you very much. And thank you,
Thanks.
Aareev, for